Jazz musicians love the 2-5-1 chord progression, and it's all over the place in jazz, but it's not just used in jazz music. The Beatles used it. Who knows how long I've loved you? Marvin Gaye used it. To bring some love in here today. And modern pop like Billie Eilish uses it. Till I rot away, dead and buried, till I'm in the casket you carried. So something's going on here where this same chord progression works in so many different styles of music. In this video, I want to explain what it is, why it works, and then leave you with 3 practical ideas for how to practice and become really comfortable with the 2-5-1 chord progression. First, if you haven't come across Roman numerals like this before as a way of referring to different chords and a chord progression, there's a very useful reason why we do that. When we label chords using numbers 2, 5, 1, we're referring to the chords by where they are in the key of the song. So in this case, I'm playing a 2-5-1 chord progression in the key of C major. Here's our C major scale. So the 2 is D, and we can play a D chord that only uses notes from the C major scale. That'll be D minor. The 5 is G, and then we can do the same thing and get a G major. And obviously 1 is C, C major. Now, if we want to play these as 7th chords, we just add on 1 note to each of those chords that still comes from the scale. So here we have D minor 7, G dominant 7, and C major 7. You still might be wondering, why call them by these numbers instead of just D minor 7, G7, C major 7? Well, if we want to play in a different key, we can use the same numbers even though the chord names will be different. Let's say we're in the key of A major. In this case, the 2 chord will be B minor 7, 5 is E dominant 7, and 1 is A major 7. Our ears actually care more about the number or function of a chord than about the name of the chord. Right? We hear a 2-5-1. We don't hear B-E-A or D-G-C. And that's why, even though those example songs I played at the beginning of the video are actually in different keys, because they use those same chord functions, 2, 5, 1, I could put them all in the same key, the key of C major, and they still sounded like the song. So that's the basic idea of using numbers to identify chord progressions. And many of you may already be familiar with that. Why does this particular chord progression work so well? For this, it helps to understand the 5-to-1 resolution. When we go from a 5 chord to a 1 chord, we get a really strong feeling of tension and resolution. And you can hear this easily if I do something like this. You can hear that our ear expects the 1 chord because it resolves the tension of the 5 chord. And that 5-to-1 resolution is the most important cadence, that is a sequence of 2 chords, in Western music. It gives a really, really strong feeling of resolution that often comes at the end of a piece of music. And it also just draws us forward through a piece of music with that momentum of tension and resolution. The power of that 5-to-1 resolution is one of the many reasons the circle of fifths is so useful. The circle of fifths arranges all 12 keys so that for every key in the circle, the one to its right, or clockwise around the circle, is up a perfect fifth. And the one to its left, or counterclockwise, is down a perfect fifth. And what this means in practice is that if you move counterclockwise around the circle of fifths, you are always resolving a 5 chord to a 1 chord. G resolves to C. Then C resolves to F. F resolves to B flat, and so on. Anytime the root notes in a chord progression are all moving counterclockwise around the circle of fifths. We call that circle of fifths movement, circle of fifths root movement. And a 2-5-1 chord progression is the best example of this kind of root movement. The 2 chord moves down a fifth to the 5 chord, which moves down a fifth to the 1 chord. We could make all of these the same chord quality. They could all be major chords, or maybe they could all be dominant 7 chords. That would still give us a strong feeling of forward momentum. But if we make the 2 chord a minor chord, the 5 chord a major or dominant 7 chord, and the 1 chord a major chord, we're only using notes that belong in the key of that final 1 chord. We call this a diatonic chord progression. We're only using notes that belong in the key. So in this case, minor, dominant, major, we're really clearly establishing the sound of that key, the key of the 1 chord at the end. And we're only using notes that belong in the key. In fact, we've used every single note from the major scale when we play a 2-5-1 chord progression using 7th chords like this. So you can see the 2-5-1 chord progression is really useful for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has a very strong sense of forward momentum. Every chord in the sequence feels kind of inevitable. It's also a great chord progression to establish a new key center. This is part of why jazz musicians love it. If I wanted to go from this C major tonality to a B flat major tonality, I can just play another 2-5-1, and by the time I arrive at that B flat major chord, the B flat major sounds inevitable. I've introduced all of the notes in a B flat major scale, and I've done so in a way where there's really strong forward momentum from each chord to the next. Now, none of this theory is useful unless you can quickly and easily find this chord progression in every key. So let me give you 3 practice ideas for how to become more familiar with the chord progression. Keep in mind, always, our goal is to play real music. So these drills are there to help you more easily recognize this pattern when it comes up in the songs that you're playing. The point is not the drill. The point is that if you're really used to finding and recognizing 2-5-1 chord progressions, you'll start to see them and hear them all over the place in real music. And that can make it really easy to learn new songs that happen to use this chord progression all over the place. The first thing that you want to do is just memorize the circle of fifths. You can do this by playing the root notes around the circle in order. I like to recommend that students do this in this pattern: up a fourth, then down a fifth. I call it the crab walk. So we're just moving up a fourth, and then down a fifth, up a fourth, down a fifth. And this will take us counterclockwise all the way around the circle of fifths. If you drill that and it becomes second nature, it's easy to move step by step through the 2-5-1 chord progression because you're just going to follow that pattern. Wherever the 2 chord starts, the next chords in the progression will follow the order of the circle of fifths in their root notes. So say I'm starting on F sharp minor 7. This is the 2 chord in the key of E major. Well, the next 2 chords are going to follow the pattern of the root notes in the crab walk drill. Right? It's just the order of the circle of fifths. F sharp minor 7, B dominant 7, E major 7. And if you're drilling this, you're just thinking about those root notes to start with, because being able to find the root notes or the names of the chords in the 2-5-1 chord progression is the first place to start if you want to become comfortable with finding it. The next thing you can practice is this. This is a really common way to use an inversion on that second chord so that you have better voice leading as you play through the chord progression. I'm playing the 2 chord in root position, then I play the 5 chord in second inversion. And what happens when you do that is that you leave the bottom 2 voices in place and you're just moving the top 2 voices down stepwise in the scale of the home key that you're in. From there, to get to the one chord, we're repeating that pattern, but with the bottom two voices. So we leave the top two voices in place, move the bottom two voices down stepwise in the scale, and you end on the one chord. You can do that in every key, and I recommend that you practice, again, counterclockwise around the circle of fifths, because you're just going to keep reinforcing this pattern of circle of fifths root movement. And so on. So that's a good drill. It's going to reinforce not only this chord progression, but all of your key signatures for major scales. My third and final piece of practice advice is my favorite, which is to find a song that you like that uses this chord progression, and then play that song in different keys. And in a way, this is just an extension of what we were doing. You know, if you imagine that this is a song, it's a really, really short, simple song, we're taking that short, simple song and putting it in all 12 keys for that drill I just recommended. So you can kind of turn any song into a drill if you put it into every key. And sometimes that's a more musical and enjoyable way to develop these foundational skills of recognizing chord functions in different keys. You find a piece of music you like, put that in different keys, and you'll be able to then take that knowledge that you have from that song into other musical contexts more easily. If you'd like more step-by-step guidance like this on how to learn piano skills that translate across many different styles of music, head to pianofluency.com. I have a program there that I built based on my years of experience working with real adult private students, where I take you step-by-step through achievable assignments that build up these skills one step at a time. You can also subscribe to my channel for more general theory information like this. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me in this video. My name is Ted with Piano Fluency.